So I am going to chat with these two gentlemen and myself about the vintage. And it's actually going to be an open conversation. As you can see, there's a relationship between all of us, and it'll be great to have us just flow through. But I'd like to continue where David was going with Raj and the questions, and just asking Raj about his location. So Raj does have his hands on what, 4 wineries, 5 wineries, Raj? 2 or 3 in California, 1 in Oregon. So can you just kind of give us for the group, because we're not all domestic, can you kind of give us a little bit of a geography lesson to where you're located? And then I'll ask David the same thing.
Yeah, so I live in the small town of Cambria, which is somewhere between Big Sur and San Luis Obispo. Most of my work happens in Lompoc, which is Santa Barbara County. We have a winery called Sandhi, which focuses on Chardonnay, the San Rita Hills. And then we have Domaine de la Côte, which is a small Pinot Noir focused estate. In Sandhi, we buy the grapes, 70% purchase grapes, 30% estate. And Domaine de la Côte, 100% estate, Pinot Noir. And then we have Evening Land up in Oregon, in the Willamette Valley in Salem, focusing on Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And I have a small farm in Cambria where I farm 11.5 acres and 15 different varieties, mostly Jura Sava varieties. So yeah, so it's a good mix. I also buy grapes from everywhere from up in Lodi a little bit down to I make wine southeast of Los Angeles in Cucamonga Valley. So got a pretty good idea of what happened in those places this year.
Awesome. So if while Raj was talking about California, if you think about California in a map and you think about San Francisco and LA, Raj is between all of them. So as you kind of move north of LA to Santa Barbara County, then you get up towards just south of San Francisco and Cambria, Big Sur area. So he's got the whole swath, as he said, the central California, as well as parts of Oregon and southern LA. And also I got to see Raj at Napa when he was harvesting some of his Merlot grapes earlier this vintage. David, how about a little geography lesson? Let us all know where you're located, and then we'll start talking about the vintage.
Absolutely. So I am currently sitting in downtown Barcelona, which is where I live. But I have a vineyard in the Priorat, which is about an hour and a half southwest of Barcelona. It's one of the oldest established areas in Spain. There's 67 or so DOs in Spain, demarcated origin regions, and only 2 that are DOC or DOQ, the highest level quality, and that's Rioja and Priorat. So I bought a 25-acre piece of land with my business partner, Frank, 5 years ago. We have 15 acres of vines on there. We won't be expanding. We're committed to biodiversity, and we grow very traditional varieties, Grenache, Carignan, some Grenache Blanc. And we sell internationally, and yeah.
Thank you, David. And for myself, my name is Dan Petroski. I'm the winemaker, proprietor of Mazakan Wines. It's a winery based in Napa Valley. I harvest all my fruit from Napa, Sonoma, and I'm extending my footprint a little bit. So if you go an hour and a half, 2 hours north of San Francisco, you end up in California, North Coast wine country. And I work within the U of Napa and Sonoma. So we're divided by a mountain range, and I work in Napa Valley and then down in Carneros connecting to Sonoma. Nothing super far out to the Sonoma coast. Mazakan is only white wine grape winery, so we are not working with any red grape varieties right now, but 11 different vineyards with 11 different grape varieties with over 22 unique harvests throughout, or harvesting dates throughout the vintage, starting in early August and ending in mid-September. But prior to that, I spent 15 years making Cabernet Sauvignon in Napa Valley at a classic, iconic winery, and do have my feet and hands and ear out to the ground, so I'll be able to talk a little bit about the Cabernet harvest. But I'm going to kick it back before we head to in-depth with California with Raj and me. I'm going to kick it back to David to start off and have us walk through the vintage a little bit.
So with me, you're saying, Dan, you want me to start? Yeah. So we had we were starting to realize after 5 vintages that we're never going to have a normal vintage. I think climate crisis is setting us down a path of like something is going to go on. It was really kind of lucky. Our first vintage, we had just a sort of normal vintage, and the old guy, old Catalan guy we bought the vineyard from said, this is normal. And then every vintage since then has been abnormal. But it's been a learning experience from a vine's perspective and from what the land is trying to tell us. 2 years ago, all of Northeast Spain had horrendous mildew that nobody could defend against. Even those that are putting a lot of synthetic chemicals in the land had 40% loss of fruit. We had 75%. And we're organic and moving towards regenerative. The next year, which was last year, the vines responded with hey, we didn't get to produce much 2 years ago, the previous year, so we're going to come back, and we had a nice bumper crop with really good fruit. This year, the vines were settling down, and it looked like it was going to be a steady year. Fruit set was good, but then the aspect of climate crisis now for us this year was a prolonged drought. We usually get some decent rainfall during the growing season. We generally, except for 3 years ago, don't have any much disease pressure, so we don't mind having rainfall during the growing season, but we just didn't get any. And so for the first time in 5 years, we had to irrigate. We're allowed to. We have drip irrigation in place. We just have never used it. We have pretty old vines, so they generally don't need it, but we had to give a couple of doses of water this year. But it wasn't enough. It's weird. Again, I have to say, like every vintage, I think is just going to be weird. We had, in summary, we had 20% less fruit by weight. But when you looked at the bunches, you go, they're actually really nice looking bunches, a little bit smaller, but there's nice air separating each berry, which is great. So it reduces some disease pressure. But the berries were small. And you go, well, that's not so bad. I don't mind losing a little bit of weight to get smaller berries, because then your skin to juice ratio is nice and high, and you get some concentration and you get some nice tannin structure. But a couple things happened. One, it took a while to ripen. Something was happening that we just couldn't get the sugars up. And some of our fruit, some of our plots couldn't get to the legal minimum. In the Priorat for red, it has to be 13.5% alcohol. So it was tough to get to that level for some of our plots. And the other thing that happened was that our acidities were low. Our pHs were fine, but our total acidities, which are normally in our part of the Priorat, which is kind of cool, it's still pretty warm, pretty cool. We get TAs up around 6, and we were sitting around 4, and it was dropping. So we had to really jump in, get the fruit in at a pretty early stage for us. Like we wanted to get a little bit more alcohol in some of the plots, but we just didn't want to lose the acidity. And so we started, our first pick was August 24th, which is unheard of. Like everybody's on vacation in Spain in August. Like they had to come home from vacation to start working. And we finished, our last day was September 8th. We had a 2.5 week, just every day. Well, every day in Spain, nobody works on Sundays. But it was fast and furious, and it was it ended up, the fruit quality was really good. The acidities are a little low, so we're going to see, but the concentrations are high, so we're going to see where that evolves, what that evolves into. All in all, I guess go back to my original statement, weird. Nobody picks this early here. People pick in October in Priorat, but times are changing. There are producers that are realizing that nobody wants 16.5% after getting watered down wines. People want fresher. We don't need raisins. We don't need prunes in our wine. So everybody's, the real professional producers are dialing it back and picking earlier, but still August 24th is a crazy start date. And sorry, one last thing before I turn it over is the order of picking was weird. Normally, we would have picked our Grenache Blanc around the same time. We have a little plot of Syrah that we would have picked those at the same time, gone into Grenache, and then just waited and waited and waited for the Carignan. But this year was all jumbled up. We picked our Carignan, then we picked one plot of Grenache Blanc, then we went to the Syrah, then we went to another plot of Grenache Noir, and the last plot of Grenache Blanc was the second to last day, which is crazy. So,
No, David, that's historically, having done this for 16 years now, or close to 16 years now, there has been a historical, even in weird years and abnormal years, a domino effect of ripening. And we saw that as well in California, that things didn't ripen on the calendar that we were accustomed to, in that, like, this is going to come after that, after this, and then you can harvest accordingly. It was a bit more jumbled and weird this year. Just for the group, I just want to let everyone know, when David's talking about his acidities being low, acid is made up of titratable TAs that he mentioned. Titratable acidities are made up of tartaric and malic acids. In severe weather conditions, when you do get drought and you do get heat waves, you do see a drop in acidity that's natural. A lot of times it's in the malic side as well, which actually could help with some of the fermentary activities. But I saw that a lot in my white grapes, where I saw very low malics and had malic fermentation happen, during primary. And it's not a bad thing. It actually makes for some very interesting white wine grapes. But so yeah, David, we look forward to tasting the wines. I'm sure they're going to be great. And but we'll switch over to oh yes, and I wanted to let everyone know, if you have any questions throughout, please throw something into the chat for anyone while they're speaking, and we'll keep our eyes on that and let you guys be part of this conversation. But so if anyone has a question for David, please jump in now, or I'm going to hand the mic off to Raj to talk a little bit about what he experienced this harvest. All you, Raj.
All right. So yeah, I can just tell you, similar things happened. Weirdness definitely here in California. Was a pretty kind of a normal bud break time. Was a very windy flowering all across from Cambria all the way to Sandhi Hills. It was very windy, so we had poor set to start with, expecting kind of medium yields, and then it was kind of a warmish summer, not super warm, but Sandhi Hills it's quite a cool place. We don't have many days in the summer, July especially, that is above like above 90 degrees, or it's always usually around 75, 80 at the highest. So mildew pressure was pretty low in the beginning, and then by July, mildew pressure was very high. And so there was a lot of July, we got pounded with fog and classic cool July. And then August was kind of normal, moderate August. And then Labor Day, as usual, we see a slight heat wave. Usually it's a day or two. This year we saw a heat wave that was unprecedented. This was like 10 days between 90 and 105 degrees, which is 30s, almost 40 degrees, which is very unusual. And of course, we produce mostly Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and as you all know, Pinot Noir does not like heat, and it's so the frenzy to start picking. The name of the game here is in California, since irrigation is legal, is if you had good canopies and you're well irrigated, your crops were decent. If you didn't have good canopies and you didn't irrigate early, and like in my place in Cambria, I don't irrigate, and small canopies, and it was really very, very tough, very tough. It was tiny yields. We were getting at Domaine de la Côte, yields were pretty normal. Sandhi, most forming 20-30% down. In Cambria, our yields were down 70%. And I heard here everywhere, all over the state, the yields are down 30-50%, and mostly because of
Hey, Raj, can I jump in with a question there on that? You're talking about canopies, and I wanted to know your thoughts on the idea of keeping more canopy, keeping your fruit cooler, keeping the inside cooler, but balancing that out with the humidity that you can get inside. Is that sort of what you're playing with? Is trying to
Yeah,
balance those two things?
but also like, I mean, we had shoot growth, but we had short shoots and not enough canopy, so there was very few clusters. There was one cluster per shoot, and we only had like 4 shoots or 6 shoots. So it was really hard, and the canopy didn't support the grapes. So when the heat came, Pinot Noir, if you don't have a good canopy for Pinot Noir, it's just shriveled out. So you had to be ready. You had to be ready with for Pinot. For other varieties, like I have Mondouse and Mencia in my vineyard, and still I'm picking it on a Monday. So those things don't matter, like Chardonnay doesn't matter that much. Pinot Noir is the only thing. Pinot Noir, you have to be really, because when that kind of heat comes, you could go from perfect cluster to raisin in 2 days. So it was, and also we buy some Cabernet Franc and some Malbec from a vineyard up in Carmel, and you can see I was watching the pHs and they just took a dive. You will go up from like 3.2 to 3.5 in just that heat spike. So it was really unusual, and then it gets better. And after this heat spike was over, and most people had picked their Pinot, and then we got 2 inches of rain. So it was good for most vines. We are totally organic, we are regenerative, so we don't spray like at Cambria. We don't spray anything. So I was like, should I spray before? I didn't spray, but the grapes made it through, and they actually liked the rain. But there was some botrytis we saw, which we went on cut them off. So and we'll see on Monday. Monday we're going to pick the grapes and see what happened with those 2 inches of rain. But it's very unusual to get 2 inches of rain in the middle of September, in like late September. So
did you get a lot of berries exploding, or was it just the humidity getting the botrytis?
No, the vines were so ready for rain that they were pretty happy, and everything is green already. So yes, it was really helpful actually for me, because I was a little worried because not for mildew but more botrytis, because we don't spray anything. We spray only just things which are no chemicals. We don't spray any sulfur or copper or anything at all. So it's just whatever we harvest and forage for around us, and so it's all reps.
It's I had mentioned earlier that we don't have much disease pressure, and just a small anecdote on our first vintage, we were waiting, we were looking, sampling, we were getting ready to pick, and we saw a storm coming in, and we went, oh no, what are we going to do? It's going to rain an inch or two. What are we going to do? It's going to explode grapes. It's going to blah blah blah. And we called up one of the old veterans in the local village. He's like, never going to happen. That water goes, you don't have any organic matter in your soil. The water's going to go straight through all the rock, and it's not going to do anything to your vines. Maybe you get a couple of % extra, of weight, but that's it. So it's a different world you guys live in West Coast than what we have for sure. So I can feel your pain though.
No, for sure. In Oregon, it was a very interesting vintage. It's turning out to be a really great classic vintage. Late bud break. There was a frost, which kind of took out a bunch of, not everywhere, but not a lot of loss where we are, but there was further loss further south of us, and north. There was loss everywhere, but Willamette Hills was not damaged too much. So it has been a kind of a cool vintage. It got warm in the last 2 months ago, so it's been nice, steady, warm, nothing too hot, and it hasn't rained. And we started picking for sparkling, and we're picking all this last week and this week, and it's going to be a pretty classic Oregon vintage. Yeah.
So you're picking into mid-October. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, no, mid-October for sure, mid-October. I mean, even here in Cambria, I'm picking my last picks on Monday. Picking Mencia, Trousseau, Mondouse, Jacquet, Altesse, and Granger, all on Monday.
Raj, there's a question about the picking Mencia in October here in California from a Spanish resident. If you want to check the chat, they wanted to ask you about what you think the expected alcohol levels and acidities will be like for the Mencia.
Oh yeah,
They
no.
were,
I mean, 2020 was the first vintage, and I got my cuttings from Ribera Sacra, from Camino Novo. So it's good plant material. It's grafted. It's 15-year-old. It's grafted on own rooted Pinot Noir, planted in 2007, and last 3 years we made wine. We picked them October 20th, 25th, and 23rd, and this year on the 17th. Yeah, no, here Mencia doesn't want to, once it gets to 17 bricks, it gets to a potential alcohol of like 9%. It does not move. It moves very slowly, and very little mildew pressure, and grows like a champ. But you gotta wait. Yields are pretty low. Overall our yields at Phelan Farm is less than 10 hectares per hectare. Pinot was maybe 15, but very, very low yields, but great concentration. Alcohol should be around 12. Last year was 12.4. Year before was 12.5. So around there, we don't really check too much, but I'm hoping it's around there. Trousseau's are also around 12. Mondouse is around 10, which is normal. And I think the Mencia here, when you taste it, and we make so little of it, it definitely tastes like it doesn't taste like beer. So it tastes, I'm not sure it tastes like the Ribera Sacra because it's so crunchy. It has more of the kind of green note because it's sort of a forest everywhere. And it tastes like Mencia, but maybe a very cool climate Mencia.
thanks for answering that, Raj. And yes, I'm working on a collaborative project with Ken Paulo at Walter Scott in Oregon. And Ken said the harvest was happening a little later than expected. So he was able to go to Burgundy and work the early vintage for 3 weeks, and then come home to his vineyards and start his harvest. So we just picked our Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio, Pinot Bianco, and a little Grenache Gris for a collab white wine there. So that was picked on October, literally a week ago, October 6th, October 7th. So yeah, their harvest in Oregon starting a little bit later, a little bit cooler climates. Here in Napa, a lot of it, what Raj had to say about that 10-degree heat wave. It was a little bit warmer than what he saw down the Central Coast. Here in Napa Valley, it got up to 43, 44, and one day it got to 49 in Fahrenheit. Those numbers are 105, 110, 110 to 120 for a 10-day period. David brought up something. He was asking questions about canopy earlier. There's been a really great study done UC Davis recently that just got released about, and also there was, I believe, one done in Spain where they're talking about how canopy management for climate change and how to think about using canopy, and going back to a little bit older style of this kind of. California used to be what we had called the California sprawl, which was the Italians, that's my background, would call it the alberelli, little trees. So these big trees that would just sprawl out and over and be an umbrelling effect to help prevent the solar radiation. But we saw there was pressure in that, and there was also disease pressure in that. There was ripening pressure in that, but it was hard to harvest those. So when California moved to vertical shoot positioning, VSP as we call it, it actually opened up not only the canopies for more photosynthesis and more solar radiation, but also opened up the fruit zone. And that's when you can get into trouble, when you have these massive overexposed vineyards to solar radiation and to heat. You see incredible dehydration, and you see an incredible amount of just sucking the life from the berries, and sometimes even sunburn or baking within inside the fruit zone itself. So if it's 120 degrees Fahrenheit, 49 degrees, the fruit zone is going to be a little bit warmer, and then inside the berry itself is going to be a little warmer. So you could be potentially slow cooking, depending on how long the heat lasts. But California is great. It's like that Mediterranean climate with these warm days, cool nights. It's the cool nights, unfortunately, during that 10-day period didn't get cold enough to slow things down. So we had an expedited harvest here in the North Coast in Napa and Sonoma. It all started with a very, very warm first quarter. January, February, March was the warmest on record. When you have that type of warmth above ground, it actually warms the soils as well, so it puts their roots into action. So we saw a little bit earlier bud break. And then we saw one of the coldest Marches on record, which then slowed everything down, which was great for us because we had a freak hailstorm in May that would have done some major damage if there was more flowering and fruit set. So kind of the vintage went back on schedule, and then obviously no rain. It's been second, third year of drought. Vines last year were hammered with yields. They were down 50 to 60 to 70% in some instances. This year things started to rebound. As Raj mentioned, there's a lot of people throughout the state that are anywhere between 20 and 50% down. There weren't a lot of vineyards that actually were above average. In my case, I said I worked for 11 vineyards. I would say 2 of them had average to above average yields this year. It was variety variable as well. I've heard of classic producers in Napa Valley harvesting earlier and heavier than they ever have. One producer in particular, Harlan, started picking Cabernet in the 3rd week of August, and they were done before the 10th of September. So it was a very strange year. The things have shifted up. You have to remember, vines are perennials. They do the same thing every year. It's just the timing gets shifted by a week to 10 days, and if it gets shifted up by a week to 10 days, and also the timing of the activity of whether it be bud break or flowering or fruit set or veraison or harvest, those start to see a variable shift. So as all those things are moving due to these extreme events we're having, we're making for, as David described, weirder and weirder vintages. So it's I'm excited about the overall quality of the vintage. I mentioned earlier that a lot of my white grapes, my classic Italian varieties, Tokai and Ribolla, have gone through ML during primary fermentation. So we're going to come across with a little bit more weight on the palate, and that kind of have a little bit more alcohol across the board in most of my wines. But I also have a lot of some really cool sites and some really great Southern Italian varieties planted here in California, like Falangina, Greco, and Fiano, that have kind of ripping acidities. TAs is over for tradable acidities at pH of 3.1 and TAs of 10. So I'm really excited about that because they make for great blending varieties. That's funny. And Valentina just asked about Italian varieties as I was talking about it. I love Italian varieties here in California. You have to remember, California was settled by the Spanish, by the Germans, by the French, by the Italians post the gold rush in the 1850s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. So we had a very diverse community of grape growing. Unfortunately, Prohibition took us out a little bit on that and kind of leveled the playing field, took a lot of that diversity away from California. And post-Prohibition, 1933, as we started to rebuild, then there was depressions and wars and rebuilds and beer and all that other shit. And we became more of a monoculture with our grape growing here in California. But there's some legacy varieties, and there are winemakers like Raj and our cohorts of friends who are excited about old world varieties here in California. Should Tokai Friulano and Ribolla Gialla be planted in California? No fucking way. They don't belong here. But Falangina and Greco and Fiano, for sure. Maybe in some Insolia, Grillo, all the Southern Mediterranean whites as well. We can probably do well here, but seems to be holding on right now as best of my ability. But I wanted to, there's a couple more questions in the chat, but David, yes.
Yeah, so I grow traditional varieties for the region, except for the little bit of Syrah we have. We grow old, these are vines that have been there forever, and traditional varieties. And you two both are experimenting with different varieties, Raj with Mencia and other varieties, Mondeuse, and you with all your Italian varieties. My question is about climate change, because we're all, knowing as these vintages are going to get weirder, the growing season's going to shift, things are going to get shorter, some things longer. What are your thoughts on the varieties that you're introducing? Are you trying them out for 5 years and then going, no, if this doesn't work, it's out and we're going to graft? Or what's some of your thought process behind some of the more unusual grapes for California that you're planting and growing?
So I grafted onto existing vineyard. There's a question also I can come back to about planting, and I think that I took an educated guess if it would work. And in the scale of things, we made 12 different wines last year, and all the varieties taste pretty classic of what they are. Now, where we are, it's not a wine growing region. Cambria is, mostly was for ranching and for cows for meat cows and for dairy. And it's very, very cool here. So Mongoose is never going to ripen to 12%, just won't. I mean, I'm talking about a ton an acre. It still won't ripen to 12%. So it's kind of moving the other way, and we haven't irrigated, which we might have to in the future. But it's I think it's worth experimenting. Like Trousseau does really well. Pulsar struggles. We got from 0.3 hectare, we got 60 pounds. So we got nothing. So from half a hectare of Sauvignon, we got like 500 liters this year. So the drought does affect these things, but I think overall, with the quality of if you taste the Sauvignon, you taste the Pulsar, the Trousseau, the Mathia, they do kind of taste classic of what they are. And also it has a lot to do with the farming, as you know. I think the question with this climate change is that how do you adapt your farming to sustain these vineyards for 20, 40, 50 years? And do you just live for today and just give the vine everything it wants in a synthetic way and take the grapes and make the wine? Or do you really kind of regenerate the soil? You make it something which will last for another generation, if humans last another generation. A nice question here on if we should plant new vineyards or the question here. I think maybe I missed. Oh, here you go. What general thoughts on planting a new vineyard as opposed to acquiring established vineyards? I'm definitely more inclined to acquiring established vineyards or grafting established vineyards or rejuvenating established vineyards, because our carbon footprint is much less. Planting a vineyard, we have to, clear land, maybe take a few trees down, unless there is a ball piece of land which you can plant, then, but still the carbon footprint is just too much. If you're taking, like we work with these old 100-year-old vineyards, which are in Cucamonga Valley, south of LA, and I'm not sure how long these vineyards will last, because a lot of the neighboring vineyards have just been taken over by housing complexes or buildings or offices. And so for environmentally speaking, planting a vineyard, unless it's an adjacent plot to another vineyard, which is totally barren, it's no point. You should acquire new vineyards. And I mean, Priorat is a good example. There's so many abandoned vineyards there. I mean, if you can find it, buy it or rent it, but it's hard. It's also so steep. Finding workers to work it, that's a different story where you are.
Well, I think the thing for us, I have the same answer to the question: get established, because of resilience to future changes in climate change. Our youngest vines are 20 years old, and our oldest are over 100. And we see the reaction of those vines to adverse climatic conditions of the vintage, and the older ones just do better. Yeah, the yield's down a little bit more, but if we want to have some stability, instead of just going like this every year in terms of our yield, the established vineyards are the way to go.
Yeah, no, and also they know how to. They've had different experiences. I mean, that's something which, a side note conversation with someone who really wants to get into philosophy, is the consciousness of a plant. We all have consciousness. Plants have consciousness. Varieties have consciousness. How you plant them, where you plant them, they react differently. And if you also, old vines are better. Yeah, old vines are better. Doesn't mean the young vines are not good. Young vines are better in a normal year. Old vines are better in a hard year, an extreme year, because they know they've had their experience before.
No, I agree with that statement, Raj, about the experience. And David, those young vines are going to be old vines one day, and they're going to have learned from those earlier experiences, just like we have learned from our experiences as humans. So I agree with the consciousness concept. I do think that, I started out a project here to plant 3 acres, just over a little over an hectare and a half, in a 21-year program to understand what varieties would work. It's 3 7-year increments to see where climate change is going to take us. As no one on this call is scientifically, academically trained in making wine. We come at life and winemaking from all the perspectives. I use a lot of my previous life in marketing, sales, finance. I look at trends, I look at data. Everyone says what goes up must come down. I've seen climate change trends continuously going up. It looks like just a slow turning of the oven on, higher and higher and higher. It doesn't look, we will have an ice age. It's not going to be in our lifetimes or next generation's lifetimes. There will be another ice age, but there's no future in sight of that for us. So we have to be thinking about what a plant looks like, what a variety looks like 20, 30, 40 years from now, if we truly believe that old vines are better. Old vines have better, much more greater experience, therefore more complex and nuanced, lower yields, more delicate. So I'm actually very excited about the concept of looking at the future through the eyes of younger vines and seeing how that next generation of vineyards will handle this heat. But it's 100% true what Raj said. You have to be able to give the vines the resources, and that means how you handle the earth. There's nothing we can control above ground with Mother Nature, but we can control what's below our feet by how we farm that land. And if we give the vine the resources it needs to protect itself against Mother Nature, it'll do the work for us. So put in the hard work, cleaning your grounds, making sure you're doing everything that's right for your vines, and that'll be your number one resiliency towards the future changing climate. But I did mention early on, we have a special treat for everyone for being here today. I might have to call Maria in to help us with that. We're coming near the last 5 minutes of our scheduled call. But the team at Club dVIN has put together an NFT harvest experience that everyone here on this call will be able to download into their wallets. So Maria just put it into the chat. So if you wanted to link on that, you'll see the QR code on the other side of the web, or just connect your wallet to the dVIN site, and that'll go right into I just did it, and hopefully, Maria, if you can show it, it would be amazing, because it's a really awesome video. It really captures the energy and essence of harvest. Is that a possibility, Maria? Yeah, if you want to scan the QR code in the shared window, you can do that, or you can just go to the website as well. Yeah, we can see your screen.
Maybe just a quick note while we're getting this up. This idea of the consciousness of a plant, I really like the way you put that, Raj. And it sounds, for those who don't follow this research, it sounds very hocusy-pocusy and a bit didactic, but it's really scientifically true. If you take care of the land, you increase the microbiology, you increase the funguses, the good funguses, and that's how plants communicate with each other. And it's common knowledge and proven within the scientific community of plants that plants talk to each other. It's not in the same way we talk, and they send out messages to each other. And if we take care of the land, the vineyards will help take care of themselves.
True. When you talk about terroir, no one talks about microbes, and microbes do 99% of the work in the vineyard, which is it's kind of funny. After being in wine for, I don't know, almost 30 years, it's funny having a realization after all that time what it's all about.
So as we have a few minutes left here and we get this NFT rolling, David, just looking forward at the wines you have in the barn, as they say here in California, in tank or in barrel. How are you feeling about the kind of flavor profiles? When those are in bottle and in our glass, what's your prediction for the 2022 vintage for you?
Well, what I really like is the color and the concentration. The tannins are still fairly ripe, even though we picked a little bit early. What I think will be the deciding factor for the vintage is the acidity level, the TAs, that normally we get much higher, and we make wines that need to be cellared for a long time. So you know, it's what did the Bordelais say? This is an early drinking vintage. Maybe that's what this will be. Just in all honesty, just cutting the bullshit. Maybe this is a vintage to drink earlier, but it's not like it's a light, reedy vintage that you got to drink up while you wait for the other stuff to go. There's still going to be concentration, but maybe the acidity is just not going to be there. But we don't know yet. We haven't finished Malo, or some tanks have, so we'll see.
How about you, Raj? Prediction on flavors and
I think for talking for Domaine de la Côte, I think it's going to be a pretty unique vintage with it'll be the ripest wines we've made to date for sure, and good density. You can already see the purity of the sites in tank, and yeah, and acids are high. So we'll see how the conversions happen, and it's a kind of an unusual high ripe and high acidity vintage. Sandhi, same thing. I think we've made some. Chardonnay wasn't as affected as Pinot Noir was. I think it's going to be a terrific vintage for white for Chardonnay, and across the board, I think what the little Merlot we made from Napa and a few other things we made from the coast. I think the tannins might not be there this year, but definitely the concentration is there because the yields are low and it's good density. I think, overall, I think it's going to be a really good vintage. It's a hard vintage for farmers. It's a good vintage for if you're buying grapes.
So Raj, do you think for you it's more of a red vintage or more of a white vintage then?
I think it's more of a white vintage. Reds are going to be good, but it's more of a white vintage.
Okay.
And then just wrapping up with some thoughts on Napa Valley, Sonoma County as well. But what we saw here was, again, extremely variable. There was a lot of early picked Cabernet grapes that were in the perfect zone, just happened to happen earlier into the vintage. Some folks have complained about low yields. Obviously, we've talked about that. Some have variable color, anthocyanin in the color of the skin of the grape, which impacts the extraction, which impacts the tannins. And some have actually lauded the fact that these lower yields are creating some of the inkiest wines they've ever made. So with a really deep, rich colors, but then there's some of them that had a little bit lighter on the red side. So like any vintage, I think we all, as wine geeks and collectors and drinkers over time, we don't use the vintage as a guide most of the time. We think of the vineyard first, the vintage second, the winemaker third. And if you know and love and trust certain vineyards and the wines from those vineyards, the vintage is just the window dressing. So I'm seeing from my side with Masakan, I'm going to have, like Raj said, I'm going to have my probably my richest wines I've ever made. But hey, let's see what Masakan. I jokingly said to my wife, I gained weight during the pandemic. Why can't my wines gain weight as well? So, so we'll see. It's going to be. I'm super excited about it. Masakan white wines are going to be available April 1. So we'll have a quick look at what the vintage is all about in the glass, starting in early April. So looking forward to sharing that with you all. And hopefully some people on this call will be down at some of the Club dVIN events. I'll be in LA. I believe Raj will be there as well for Fête de Champagne. And then I know there's an event happening in Dubai and then all across Europe. If you just check out the dVIN website for events, if you haven't seen the email or follow the Instagram or the LinkedIn, please go do that. And that's it. We're going to let you, we ran a couple minutes late, but I want to say thank you to David. I want to say thank you to Raj. Thank you to Maria, who's been hiding behind our NFT up there. And yeah, don't forget to download your Vintage 22 Harvest Experience NFT. And we look forward to raising the glass with you all soon. Cheers, guys.
Cool. Thanks.